is a 2013 BMW 135is, and it's a very cool modern BMW. A lot of people don't know about this car, but it perfectly combines small, tossable sizing, good power, and some great BMW factory upgrades. And it's rare and special, too. If you don't know the 135is, today you're going to learn, because I'm going to review this car and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, big news, this 135is is currently for sale and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. The 135is was sold for only 1 year, and this one has low mileage and a manual transmission. It's great, and you can get it on Cars and Bids. So once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this 135is, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. All right, time for the quirks and features of the BMW 135is, and we'll start with a little background. So, the 1 Series, the original BMW 1 Series, came out in 2005 around the world, and it was sold as a hatchback or a coupe or a convertible. But the most popular version globally by far was the hatchback. It was offered as a 2-door or a 4-door hatchback, and although those sportier body styles were offered, the hatchback was the one most people got, and it wasn't necessarily seen as a sports car, a performance car. It was just sort of a more sporty, more premium alternative to a typical compact car. However, here in North America, the 1 Series was only sold as a coupe or a convertible. We didn't get the hatchback, and it was positioned as sort of a more sporty vehicle instead of just an entry-level model. And as a result, the US market only ever got the top powertrains for this car. So that meant the base model was the 128i with about 230 horsepower, and the top version was the 135i with about 300 horsepower, both straight-six engines and rear-wheel drive, like BMW is so famous for. Now, in 2011, BMW released the high-performance version of this car, the 1M, or the 1 Series M, and it used a more powerful version of the 135i's engine, tuned up to about 335 horses. The 1M is absolutely legendary. Values have been crazy high, production numbers were low, and they are desirable collector cars today. They were only made for that 2011 model year, and it is a beloved car in the BMW enthusiast community. This car, however, is not as well known. The 135is was a different high-performance version of the original 1 Series, and it kind of flew under the radar for a lot of reasons. One, because it was only sold in 2013, right as this 1 Series was coming to an end, but also because this was only offered in North America. By 2013, across the world, this car had already been redesigned, and so the 135is model didn't go on sale. But here in the States, this design lasted a little bit longer, long enough for BMW to come out with a second performance model. The 135is only sold here and only for 1 year. Very special. And this really was a special car. Despite just one extra letter in its name, 135is, compared to 135i, it actually had a lot of upgrades, including extra power. This car used the same turbocharged straight-six that the 135i had, but it came standard with the BMW Performance Power Kit, which boosted output to about 320 horses and almost 320 pound-feet of torque. In fact, the 135is was closer in power to the famous 1M than it was to the regular 135i. More power, better acceleration, that's a good thing, and the upgrades certainly didn't stop there. This car also had sport suspension, which was an improvement to make it handle better, of course, and it came from the factory with a sport Sport exhaust to make it sound better as well. And beyond just the mechanical upgrades, BMW also gave this car larger wheels. These distinctive wheels were only on the 135is and the 335is, but regardless, no other 1 Series model got these wheels, and this car also had sort of a sporty body kit. These flared rocker panels were distinctive to the 135is and helped set it apart from other 1 Series models. Overall, it was actually a pretty comprehensive upgrade, and since it was only sold here in North America and only for 1 year, it's not especially common. To me, though, the interesting thing about this car in the years since it was on sale is that it's just become kind of a relative bargain in the performance BMW world. A 1 Series M will routinely top $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on the used market, often sold to collectors who store it away and preserve it perfectly. But these 135is models will often sell between $10,000 and $20,000, only rarely a little bit more than that for low mileage clean cars like this one, but still a total bargain compared to the famous 1M, which is a lot more money, but not a lot more car when you really get down to what these added. And I think part of the reason for that is everybody knows the 1M and of course the famous M brand, but a lot of people don't even realize this car exists. It flies under the radar for a lot of enthusiasts, but it offers a lot of the same thrills just for a lot less spend. So let's talk quirks and features, and we have to start with this car's looks, which are a bit odd. The 1 Series was always kind of criticized for a little bit of a strange design, and I don't think even with time, 15, almost 20 years after it went on sale, I don't think it's ever really grown on people all that much. It looks a bit stubby, let's just say. Not sort of a traditional, beautiful, flowing coupe, but kind of a little abbreviated. It certainly is distinct. It's a bit of an acquired taste. But the benefit of its kind of stubby, unusual design is its small size. At around 172 inches long, this is small, really small. In fact, the 1 Series is basically the same size as the old E30 BMW 3 Series that is so beloved by enthusiasts that hailed from BMW's great period in the late 80s and early 90s. A lot of enthusiasts say modern BMW models have gotten too big. This was the antidote, a small, tossable, fun performance car. The design was a little bit of an unfortunate byproduct, but the size was right on point. And for that reason, I've always kind of thought of this car as a bit of a modern day E30. It was obviously sized this way, but also kind of the entry-level BMW, rear-wheel drive, sporty. A lot of them were 2 doors. In this case, all of them were 2 doors. And of course, they've now depreciated to the point where a lot of these are being snapped up by car enthusiasts instead of the aspiring middle managers who bought them when they were new, which was also the case with the E30. Same original clientele and then same enthusiast clientele as the car aged. In a lot of ways, this car has a lot of E30 in it. And general BMW. You come around to the front, you can see the famous BMW kidney grille right there, front and center, and displayed from an era before the grille got big and ridiculous and controversial and lighted up. It's just your regular old BMW grille. But speaking of lighting, you do have on the sides of the grille the famous BMW halos. You turn on the parking lights and there are your halos reminding you that this is all BMW, which I think is a cool thing about this car. Now, of course, being more modern, this car did have quite a few things that the E30 BMW 3 Series didn't have, like, for example, this key fob. Go to open the door and you can see you get a fob instead of a traditional normal key, and the fob is rather unusual. The lock button is the BMW logo. The unlock button is an up arrow. I've never entirely understood that, but that is the situation. Now, you climb inside the car and you also discover another big thing you didn't get in the E30, and that is iDrive. That was the name that BMW gave to its infotainment system in this era, and early versions of iDrive were frustrating, confounding, and terrible. This car doesn't have one of those very early versions, but it still isn't the world's easiest thing to use. It's all controlled in a screen that's out of your reach, and so it's not a touchscreen. Instead, you control everything with these buttons and this dial and switches down here in the center, and it can be a little frustrating to kind of scroll around in this screen rather than just tap or touch like you'd expect from a modern infotainment system. The good news is that most of your stereo controls are not incorporated into iDrive. You can see a lot of your stereo controls down here separate, and your climate controls are also not incorporated into iDrive. So the stuff that you're going to be using the most frequently, it's not in iDrive. You don't have to interact with it quite as frequently as you might with infotainment systems in brand new cars. Now, despite your key fob situation and your iDrive situation, you look in here and you can see that this interior is mostly old school focused BMW in a great way. You can see, for example, traditional analog gauges that are very clear, very easy to see what's going on. You don't have a busy gauge screen situation here. That's not what this car is about. Same deal with the steering wheel, a big thick steering wheel rim, feels really nice to touch. And as you look around in general, the materials in here are all surprisingly excellent. This car came from a good era of BMW interiors, and even though you do have some cheap plastics in some places, you generally have really nice stuff to touch, to feel, to press. Everything feels high quality and solid in this interior. Specifically in this car, because the mileage is just so low, it really does almost feel new from the perspective of this interior. It's really impressive to see how all this stuff was before it wore out, like in many other 1 Series models, but generally a nice, purposeful interior without a lot of fuss and extraneous details like you find in some modern car cabins. And of course, another old school BMW touch you have in here, a 6-speed manual transmission. The 135is was offered with an automatic, a dual clutch in fact, or you could get it with an old school manual. And of course, this car with the manual transmission just makes it that much more special, having a relatively modern, fast BMW where you can row your own gears, a real performance enthusiast car. But beyond all that stuff, there are some rather interesting quirks in here worth mentioning, like for example, the key fob situation. I already showed you the fob itself, and the interesting thing here is that in order to start up the car, you have to put the key fob into this slot and then press the engine start stop button, which seems odd. Why not be able to just get in and press the engine start stop button? Well, it turns out you can actually just get in and press the engine start stop button. You don't have to put your key into that slot. So you might be thinking, why exactly, therefore, is there a slot for the key there if you don't have to use it? The answer is, I have no idea. I guess you could just use that for key storage if that's what you wanted to do, and then you could start your car. Another interesting situation in this interior is the cup holder situation. You can see one very obvious cup holder. That's this one. It's for the front passenger, and it is tacked on to the side of the center console. It may not have been an afterthought, but it clearly looks like one, not integrated into the overall design of the dashboard or center console in any way. It just sticks out there. Now, I say that cup holder is for the passenger because there is a separate cup holder for the driver. It is located here, and it is also not particularly functional. You can see it's actually directly underneath the lid for the center console storage area. So if you have any actual cup there, the center console storage will not close. So neither cup holder thought through particularly well. Such was the case with German cars from this era. Another interesting quirk in this car worth pointing out is the turn signal situation. Unfortunately, the 135is hails from the era of awful BMW turn signals, where if you wanted to put on the turn signal, you pressed it down and then it returned to the center position. So you didn't really know how to turn it off. You press it down again and that doesn't really work. You press it the other way and that turns on the other side turn signal. Instead, you had to give it sort of half presses and speak the language of the turn signal in order to get it to work like you want, which is really stupid. Honestly, that's not what anyone was asking for from their turn signals. BMW thought they had innovated here, and instead people hated it and they got rid of it, but this car still has it. Now, one thing I really love about this interior is just how subtle it is in here. Compared to a modern M car where you have all sorts of M badges and colors and stitching basically everywhere, in here you only have one badge showing you're in something special. On the dashboard, this plaque that says 135is. That's it. That's the only thing in here that really emphasizes the extra performance specialness of this car. Although I have to say, I really like the subtle blue stitching on the seats. You can see it on the backrest and the bottom, all throughout the seat, and you have blue piping on the floor mats, which gives you a very little tiny subtle touch. You also have a few M logos, although very few. There's one on the door sill. When you open the door, you can see it there. There's also one on the top of the shifter, as you can see, and one on the base of the steering wheel, but that's it. This car is very subtle, both inside and out. You don't really see all of the extra stuff, even though it's an extra rare, high-performance model. In fact, driving this car, you almost feel like you're getting away with something. Like, there should be more to this. It should cost more, it should have more fanfare, but it doesn't, and it almost seems like you're the only one who knows that. Anyway, next we move on to the back seats. Now, accessing the back seats is surprisingly easy considering no one will ever use the back seats in this car. To get at them, you have this latch. It's plastic. You pull on it and then the seat folds forward. And there's this surprisingly helpful switch here where you can push the seat forward or backward electronically. You push the button and the seat goes forward or backward to give you more space to climb inside. Now, in the back, you can see not really all that much going on. And in fact, nothing particularly special compared to a standard 1 Series. You have 2 seats back there, you have some storage in the middle, but that's basically it. There's no extra storage compartments, there's no climate vents or heated seats, you can't even open the windows. You just have a pretty basic back seat, and again, that's probably because BMW knew no one was really ever gonna be using it. And finally, we move on to the trunk, the cargo area of the 135is. Open up the trunk and you can see nothing particularly interesting back here, although it's worth pointing out this is a surprisingly large trunk for a vehicle like this. Small size car, not intended to be really hugely practical, but there's a decent amount of space back here. You really do have good space for storing items inside the car, which can make this a pretty practical vehicle if that's what you're after. But you're probably more interested in what this car is like to drive. I know I am. I love this platform, the BMW 1 Series, and I've never driven a 135is. I'm excited to take it out, so let's get behind the wheel and see how it drives. All right, driving the 135is, and just 3 seconds into this drive, I am reminded exactly why I love this E82 platform so much and why I have always been so positive about these cars. Specifically, first thing you feel, you get in this car, you drive even a little bit, the steering weight is so wonderfully wonderful. But then you actually go to steer and the weight is just perfect. I mean, just perfect. Not too heavy, not too light. It really is exactly what you're looking for in a sporty car like this one. The size combined with the steering feel are just two things that make this car absolutely perfect from the outset, from the moment you first get inside and drive. Then you have the powertrain. These turbo 6-cylinder engines, and there were two, the N54 and the N55. The 3-liter turbo 6-cylinder engines are just wonderful. They have their issues, it should be known. Although especially the N54, which was the earlier one, not in this car. But the thing that they were great at, the thing that I loved them for then, I remember driving when they were new and I still love them for, is just this potency of power. Like you step on it and it just gets you into the rev range quick. It doesn't feel like a V8 where it's big and muscular and whatever, but it also doesn't feel like a turbo 4-cylinder where you feel like you're just not getting enough. It's powerful, but it's just straining. It just feels like it's doing exactly the amount of work that you would want to be as athletic as you need it to be. efficiency. It is just absolutely perfect in terms of power delivery. I have always loved this era BMW turbo 6-cylinder engines, and a lot of car enthusiasts do love these engines, and in some cases they're kind of heartbroken over the way that they are in terms of reliability. But this one is running smooth and running great, and it just reminds you of what is so great about this powertrain. And it really is the perfect amount of power for this car. 320 horses in a car this size, this weight, is just like such a great combination of factors. But just for a pure driving experience perspective, this is an amazing kind of middle ground between like too slow and too fast. It's like just what you want. Enjoyable and fast and fun without being so over the top that you're just always getting in trouble. And man, the steering feel and the tossability and just the handling of this car. It's not a sports car. It is not a Cayman. You know, a Cayman is a purpose-built sports car that is a sports car. This is a car that was made to be sort of a hatchback that was turned into a sportier car. And you definitely feel that. That's definitely clear, especially in the lesser 1 Series models. It's less so here, but you do still have a little bit more body roll, a little bit more weight, a little bit less like perfect weight distribution in a Cayman with the engine in the middle. But there's still so much to love about this car. It almost feels like a true purpose-built sports car, like a 911 or a Z4 or something like that. It almost has that feel, particularly this 135is with the throatier exhaust and the sport suspension, which I think really helps the driving experience. And of course, the last thing that's great about this car is the manual transmission. I'm not the biggest fan of modern day BMW manuals. I feel like the clutches are a little bit too kind of springy, and the shifter can often feel rubbery. This particular car has a few upgrades. I think some of them may have addressed some of that stuff, and it does feel nice to drive. I still think the clutch is a little too springy. It's kind of a constant BMW complaint that I have. But it's obviously amazing to have a manual in this car. The alternative was a dual clutch auto, which was a desirable transmission and made the car fast and fun. But of course, the real drivers are going to want the manual, and the manual ones are the ones that are worth the most now. And for everybody out there, and there are so many people complaining, oh, BMWs are getting too big, BMWs have, lost their way, whatever. Well, this was BMW's attempt at, okay, the 3 Series has grown to a point where we've created an entry level that we can step into, and this car was that entry level, and it really does what it should. Like, it is just from an enthusiast perspective, it is just wonderful. And from a used car enthusiast perspective, I think it is such a deal considering what it offers. It feels just like a 1M in a lot of ways, but you pay 20% of the money and you still get these same things that make the 1 Series so damn great, as long as you can stay on top of BMW turbo 6-cylinder maintenance and repairs. But if you can, this car is so wonderfully rewarding, and specifically the 135is is sort of the bargain, under the radar pick of the litter, the if you know version, and now you know. And so that's the 2013 BMW 135is. This is a great car, and I'm thrilled that I got to check it out. I love this platform, and while the BMW 1 Series M is really awesome, it's also really expensive, and this offers a lot of the same thrills without the crazy price tag, and you can get it on Cars and Bids. Anyway, now it's time to give this 135is a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 56 out of 100, which puts the 135is here against rivals. A strong showing, falling just behind the E92 M3 competition and the famed 1 Series M. Truthfully, the 135is is awesome, with excellent sizing, a great powertrain, sharp handling, and good acceleration, and its price tag makes it an especially appealing value proposition. I really love these cars, and even a hardcore devotee of the 1M should take a long look at the 135is before making a decision.